How are you guys doing? It is Monday, September 21st, 2020, out here in this quarantine. I'm James Sims, and for today's episode, I'm going to take you through all of yesterday's performances by the elite players, and then just players who just put on elite performances. But for yesterday, I'm going to start with NFL football because, of course, it was Sunday. It was week 2 of the NFL since everything that had with the coronavirus happened. So I'm going to take you through those games. And through the first game I'm going to take you through is probably one of the biggest comebacks you'll ever see in a while. Last night, the Dallas Cowboys were able to beat the Atlanta Falcons 40-39 to get their first win of the season after being down 20-0 at one point in the first half. The Cowboys were able to completely turn it around and come back and beat the Atlanta Falcons. For the Atlanta Falcons, their quarterback, Matt Ryan, would complete 24 of his 36 passes. Their elite quarterback would throw for 273 yards, 4 touchdowns, and no picks. On the ground, their elite running back, Todd Gurley II, would run for 61 yards on 21 carries. Through the air, Calvin Ridley would be their leading receiver with 109 yards and 7 receptions and 2 touchdowns. Their elite wide receiver, Julio Jones, would finish with 24 yards on 2 receptions for the day. On the defensive side of the ball, the Falcons were able to recover 3 fumbles. They were able to force a lot of turnovers, by the way. Damontae Kazee and Keanu Neal will kind of lead the way on defense. Kazee had 8 tackles on the day. Keanu Neal had 7. And then just looking at who played an incredible game in the trenches, Takk McKinley would finish with a tackle for loss on the day. Just a good all-around game for the Falcons. Looking at the Cowboys, their quarterback Dak Prescott would complete 34 of his 47 passes for 450 yards. He threw a touchdown the day. Their elite running back Ezekiel Elliott would finish with 89 yards on 22 carries and a touchdown. He also had 33 yards and 6 receptions through the air. They had 2 receivers go over 100 yards. CeeDee Lamb had 106 yards and 6 receptions. Their rookie out of Oklahoma, and Amari Cooper would finish with 100 yards on 6 receptions. Ezekiel Elliott would fumble twice, but they'd still find a way to win. On the defensive side, Jalen Smith would lead the way with 13 tackles on the day. Joe Thomas had 12. Everson Griffin had a sack on the day, 2 tackles for loss. And they were able to win at the very end on a field goal from Greg the Leg Zuerlein. And with this win, the Cowboys are 1-1, and the Atlanta Falcons are now 0-2 in the NFC South. Continuing on with the earlier games yesterday, the Chicago Bears were able to beat the New York Giants 17-13 last night, as they were able to get their second win of the season. Mitch Trubisky would throw for 190 yards with 2 touchdowns and 2 picks on the day. For the New York Giants, their elite running back Saquon Barkley would finish with 28 yards on 4 carries, and he didn't even get anything through the air because he ended up doing something to his knee. I have no idea how that's going to turn out, but I imagine we're going to find out. And then even on the defense side of the ball, Kyler Fackrell would finish with 4 tackles and a sack with 2 tackles for loss on the day. Their defense had a pretty good game. They had 4 sacks total as a team, but they still weren't strong enough to beat the Chicago Bears, who scored all 17 of their points in the first half. David Montgomery on the ground would finish with 82 yards and 16 carries. And then Khalil Mack, their elite linebacker defensive end, would finish with 3 tackles on the day. He finished with a sack too. With this win, the Chicago Bears are 2-0, and the New York Giants are officially 0-2 in the NFC East. Continuing on, the Green Bay Packers were able to beat their divisional rival, the Detroit Lions, 42-21 yesterday. Just really kind of dominating the game. The Detroit Lions had the lead in the first quarter, but then the Packers basically turned it around and kept just destroying them. Just looking at the Lions for how they did, Matthew Stafford, their quarterback, would throw for 244 yards with 2 touchdowns and a pick. Adrian Peterson, their running back, would finish with 41 yards and 7 carries. And then just looking at how they did on the defensive side, Jeff Okudah, their young elite corner, would finish with 7 tackles on the day. He would lead the team in tackles. Incredible day for him. Looking at the Green Bay Packers, their GOAT-level quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, would finish with 240 yards as he completed 80 of his 30 pass attempts. He would throw for 2 touchdowns. And then Aaron Jones on the ground would finish with 168 yards on 18 carries and 2 touchdowns. And he's also their leading receiver with 68 yards on 4 receptions. And he had 3 total touchdowns on the day, to add on to the fact that he had, 236 yards of total offense yesterday. On the defense would be Christian Kirksey, who would have 12 tackles on the day. Rashawn Gary, their rookie, I believe either their rookie or their second-year defensive tackle, finished with 4 tackles on the day and 1.5 sacks for the Green Bay Packers. Big win for them as they're now 2-0. They're now 2-0, leading the NFC North. Continuing on, the Tennessee Titans were able to beat their division rivals, the Jacksonville Jaguars, 33-3 yesterday. Ryan Tannehill would lead the way as he threw for 239 yards and 4 touchdowns. On the Jacksonville Jaguars side, their quarterback Gardner Minshew, the second, would throw for 339 yards with 3 touchdowns and 2 picks. James Robinson would lead all rushes on the day as he ran for 102 yards and 16 carries, and he also had a touchdown on the day. DJ Chark would be the Jaguars' leading receiver. He had 84 yards on 4 receptions. He had his longest being a 45-yarder. And looking at their defensive side of the ball, Miles Jack would lead the way with 11 tackles on the day. And looking at the Tennessee Titans, like I said, Tannehill would have an amazing game. Derrick Henry, their elite running back, would finish with 84 yards on 25 carries. Jonnu Smith would be their leading receiver. He had 84 yards on 4 receptions, and he had 2 touchdowns on the day. With this win, the Tennessee Titans they're now 2-0. And looking at their defensive side, Kenny Vaccaro, their safety, would finish with 11 tackles and a sack on the day. And he'd also have 2 passes defended. Same with Malcolm Butler, the hero for the Patriots when they won the Super Bowl a few years back. He finished with 11 tackles on the day and 2 passes defended. With this win, like I said, the Titans are 2-0 and the Jaguars are now 1-1 in the AFC South. Continuing on. The Indianapolis Colts were able to beat the Minnesota Vikings 28-11 in a very big win as they got their first win of the season. Looking out to Minnesota, their quarterback Kirk Cousins would throw for 113 yards with no touchdowns and 3 interceptions. Their running back Dalvin Cook would finish with 63 yards on the ground with a touchdown as well. Looking at their defense, Eric Kendricks would lead the way as he finished with 12 tackles, one of them being a tackle for loss. And then they'd also have Yannick Ngakoue, who would finish. I'm sorry if I butchered your name. He finished with 3 tackles, and he finished with a sack, 2 tackles for loss. Looking at the Indianapolis Colts, their quarterback Phillip Rivers would throw for 214 yards with a touchdown and a pick. Jonathan Taylor, their young running back out of Wisconsin, would finish with 101 yards on the ground and a touchdown. He also had 9 yards through the air. Mo Alley Cox would finish with 111 yards on 5 receptions through the air. Amazing game for the Indianapolis Colts offense. And then looking at how their defense fared, DeForest Buckner, the defensive lineman, finished with 3 tackles on the day, 1.5 sacks for him. With this win, the Indianapolis Colts are now 1-1 as the Minnesota Vikings now drop to 0-2. For their season, just continuing on. Also going to the AFC East, the Buffalo Bills were able to beat their division rivals, the Miami Dolphins, 31-28. This game will kind of go down to the very end as well. Ryan Fitzpatrick for the Miami Dolphins would throw for 328 yards and 2 touchdowns. Myles Gaskin will be their leading rusher. He'd have 46 yards on the ground. And then Mike Gesicki would finish with 130 yards on 8 receptions for them, and he'd have a touchdown on the day. Great game for him. On the defensive side of the ball, Nick Needham would lead the team in tackles with 12. And then just looking at the Buffalo Bills, their quarterback Josh Allen would lead the way yet again. He threw for 417 yards, completing 24 of his 35 passes, throwing for 4 touchdowns on the day. Stephon Diggs would be his main receiver as he finished with 153 yards on 8 receptions and a touchdown on the day. They'd also have John Brown with 82 yards. Big game overall for the Buffalo Bills on the defensive side of the ball. Jordan Poyer would finish with a sack. Levi Wallace had 10 tackles on the day. Just big win overall for the Buffalo Bills as they are now 2-0, and the Miami Dolphins now fall to 0-2 in the AFC East. Another big game from yesterday, the defending NFC champs, the San Francisco 49ers, are able to beat the New York Jets 31-13 yesterday to get their first win of the season. Sam Darnold would finish with 179 yards for New York as he finished with a touchdown. Frank Gore, future Hall of Fame running back, finished with 63 yards on 21 carries for the day. And Chris Hogan would be their leading receiver with 75 yards on 6 receptions. On the defensive side of the ball, Quinnen Williams, their young defensive tackle, would finish with he'd finish with the team lead in tackles, tied with Marcus May with 7. He'd have 2 sacks on the day, and he'd have 4 tackles for loss. Big game for him. And then Jordan Jenkins would finish with 4 tackles with a sack, 1.5 tackles for loss. Looking at San Francisco, their quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo would throw for 131 yards and 2 touchdowns before he was eventually taken out for Nick Mullins. Raheem Mostert would finish with 92 yards on 8 carries on the day with a touchdown. Big win from Jordan Reed, their tight end, who had 50 yards on 7 receptions and 2 touchdowns. And on the defensive side of the ball, Fred Warner would lead their team in tackles with 12 on the day. With this win, the San Francisco 49ers are now 1-1, and with this loss, the New York Jets are officially 0-2 with 14 weeks of football remaining. Jumping out to Philly, the Philadelphia Eagles hosted the Los Angeles Rams, and the Rams were able to beat them 37-19 to give the Eagles their second loss of the season. Carson Wentz with over 242 yards with no touchdowns. He threw 2 picks on the day. Miles Sanders, their running back, would finish with 95 yards on 20 carries and a touchdown on the ground. He also had 36 yards through the air. Deshaun Jackson was their leading receiver, as he finished with 64 yards on the day. Looking at their defensive side, Avonte Maddox would finish with 8 tackles, all solo tackles, by the way, for him. Looking out to the Los Angeles Rams, Jared Goff, their former first-round pick, with over 267 yards with 3 touchdowns and no picks. Darrell Henderson Jr. would be their leading rusher, as he finished with 81 yards on 12 carries and a touchdown. On the ground, he also had 40 yards on 2 receptions through the air. Cooper Kupp would finish with 81 yards, but Tyler Higbee would finish with 54 yards and 5 receptions and 3 touchdowns on the day for the Los Angeles Rams. On the defensive side of the ball, their linebacker Micah Kiser would finish with 16 tackles on the day. He'd have an amazing game. With this win, the Los Angeles Rams are now 2-0 in the NFC West, and the Philadelphia Eagles are 0-2 in the NFC East. Continuing on, the Pittsburgh Steelers hosted the Denver Broncos and were able to beat them 26-21 to get their second win of the season. For the Broncos, Jeff Driscoll was their quarterback for most of the game, as Drew Lock was eventually taken out with a knee injury. Driscoll complete 18 of his 34 passes for 256 yards and 2 touchdowns and a pick. Melvin Gordon III would be their leading receiver, their leading running back. He'd have 70 yards on the ground, 14 yards through the air. He'd have 1 receiving touchdown. Cortland Sutton would be their leading receiver with 66 yards and 3 receptions. And looking at the defensive side of the ball, Justin Simmons and Alexander Johnson would both lead the team in tackles with 8 on the day. Looking at the Pittsburgh Steelers, it would be Ben Roethlisberger, who would throw for 311 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick on the day. James Conner, their running back, would run for 106 yards on 16 carries on the day. He also had 15 yards through the air. He had 1 touchdown on the ground. Deontay Johnson would be their leading receiver, as he had 92 yards and 8 receptions and a touchdown for the Steelers. On the defensive side of the ball, Mike Hilton would have an amazing game, as he finished with 8 tackles. He finished with a sack and 2 tackles for loss. TJ Watt would have an amazing game, as he finished with 4 tackles on the day and 2.5 sacks for Pittsburgh. With this win, the Pittsburgh Steelers are now 2-0, as the Denver Broncos now drop to 0-2 in their division. Just continuing on, looking at going to Tampa Bay, Tom Brady was able to get his first win of the season, as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were able to beat the Carolina Panthers, their in-state rivals. Teddy Bridgewater for the Panthers would throw for 367 yards. He'd have no touchdowns, but he'd throw for 2 picks. Christian McCaffrey, their elite running back, would finish with 59 yards on the ground on 18 carries with 2 touchdowns. And through the air, he'd also have 29 yards. DJ Moore would be their leading receiver with 120 yards on 8 receptions. And looking at their defense, Rasul Douglas would finish with 7 tackles, so would Jeremy Chin. Big win for them. Brian Burns had a couple tackles for loss. And then looking at Tampa Bay, their GOAT quarterback, Tom Brady, would finish with 217 yards through the air with a touchdown and a pick. Leonard Fournette, their running back, would finish with 103 yards on 12 carries with 2 touchdowns on the ground. He'd also have 13 yards on 4 receptions through the air. Mike Evans, their elite receiver, would finish with 104 yards on 7 receptions and 1 touchdown. And then jumping to their defensive side of the ball, Devin White, their young linebacker, would finish with 15 tackles on the day. Big game for him. And Ndamukong Suh would finish with 2 tackles on the day, as he had 5 tackles as well. And with this win, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are now 1-1, as the Carolina Panthers are now 0-2 this season. Continuing on with some of the bigger games as we transition to some of the afternoon games. The Arizona Cardinals were able to beat the Washington football team 30-15 to get their second win of the season. For Washington, Dwayne Haskins would finish with 223 yards with a touchdown through the air. Antonio Gibson, their running back, would finish with 55 yards and 13 carries, and he'd also have a touchdown for the day. Terry McLaurin would be their leading receiver, as he finished with 125 yards on 7 receptions with a touchdown. Looking at the defensive side of the ball, Kevin Pierre-Louis would lead the way with 15 total tackles on the day, one of them being for loss. Chase Young, their elite young defensive end, would finish with 4 tackles and yet another sack, as he had 2 tackles for loss on the day. Looking out to Arizona, their young quarterback, defending offensive rookie of the year, Kyler Murray, finished with 286 yards through the air, as he threw for a touchdown and an interception. He also ran for 67 yards on 8 carries. He had 2 touchdowns on the ground. Kenyon Drake would have 86 yards on 20 carries. DeAndre Hopkins, their elite receiver, would finish with 68 yards on 8 receptions and a touchdown on the day. Their future Hall of Famer, Name wide receiver Larry Fitzgerald would finish with 50 yards and 7 receptions as well. Looking on to their defense, Jordan Hicks would finish with 10 tackles. So would their linebacker Devondre Campbell, who they got from Atlanta. He had 2 tackles for loss on the day. With this win, the Arizona Cardinals are now 2-0, and with this loss, the Washington football team is now 1-1, sitting in the NFC East among the other teams that they're playing with. I'm just continuing to transition. The defending Super Bowl champs, Kansas City Chiefs, were able to beat their division rival, the Los Angeles Chargers, in overtime, 23-20. For the Chargers, Justin Herbert from Oregon would get his first start, as he would throw for 311 yards, completing 22 of his 33 attempts. Finishing with a touchdown and an interception on the day. Austin Eckler would finish with 93 yards and 16 carries for the Chargers as well. Keenan Allen would be their leading receiver, as he finished with 96 yards on 7 receptions, as Jalen Guyton got their only receiving touchdown of the day. Looking at their defensive side of the ball, Kenneth Murray would finish with 10 tackles on the day. Joey Bosa would finish with a sack, as he had 4 tackles as well. And then jumping out to Kansas City, their elite quarterback, defending Super Bowl MVP Patrick Mahomes, finished with 302 yards to the air as he completed 27 of his 47 passing attempts. He finished with 2 touchdowns on the day. And then on the ground, he would be their leading rusher as well. He had 54 yards on 6 carries. Looking at the receiving side, their elite wide receiver Tyreek Hill would finish with 99 yards on 5 receptions and a touchdown, and their elite tight end Travis Kelce would finish with 90 yards on 9 receptions, and he'd also have a touchdown for the day. Looking at the defensive side of the ball, Damian Wilson would lead the team in tackles with 12. 1.5 of them were for sack, or was for a sack. With this win, the Kansas City Chiefs are now 2-0, as the Los Angeles Chargers now drop to 1-1 after a very impressive performance against quite arguably the best team in all of football. Continuing on with yet another afternoon game, the Baltimore Ravens took on the Houston Texans in Houston and were able to get their second win of the season, beating them 33-16. For Houston, their elite quarterback Deshaun Watson would complete 25 of his 36 passes for 275 yards with a touchdown and an interception on the day. Looking at their receiving, Brandon Cooks would be their leading receiver with 95 yards on 5 receptions. And looking at the defensive side of the ball, Zach Cunningham would finish with 15 tackles, and one of them was for a sack on the day. J.J. Watt, their GOAT level defensive end, would finish with 2 sacks on the day. Those were his only 2 tackles. And looking at the Baltimore Ravens, their elite quarterback, defending NFL MVP Lamar Jackson would throw for 204 yards through the air with a touchdown, as he completed 18 of his 24 passes, and he'd also run for 54 yards on 16 carries for them as well. Mark Ingram would have a touchdown, as he finished with 55 yards on 9 carries. Marquise Brown would be their leading receiver with 42 yards. They'd have 5 receivers with over 20 with 20 yards on the day for Baltimore, as they kind of spread the ball around. Looking at the defensive side of the ball, Patrick Queen would be their leading tackler, as he finished with 9 on the day. Calais Campbell would finish with a sack and 2 tackles for losses as well. With this win, the Baltimore Ravens are now 2-0, as the Houston Texans now drop to 0-2 in the AFC South after being a playoff team last year. Continuing on and looking at the rest of these Week 2 games. Going to the last game of the night, on Sunday night, the Seattle Seahawks were able to beat the New England Patriots 35-30. Jumping out to New England, their quarterback Cam Newton would throw for their elite quarterback Cam Newton would complete 30 of his 44 passes for 397 yards with a touchdown and an interception. He also ran for 47 yards on the ground on 11 carries, finishing with 2 touchdowns on the day. I mean, that's still 444 yards of offense with 3 touchdowns. Through the air, Julian Edelman would be their leading receiver with 179 yards on 8 receptions. And then looking at the defensive side of the ball, John Simon would lead their team in tackles with 8 of them. Shalik Calhoun would finish at the sack. And looking at Seattle, their elite, possibly the best player in all of football, Russell Wilson, would complete 21 of his 28 passes for 288 yards with 5 touchdowns and 1 interception through the air. Looking at Chris Carson would lead their team in running with 72 yards and 17 rushes. DK Metcalf would lead the team in receiving yards with 92 yards on 4 receptions and a touchdown. His longest reception was 54 yards. Tyler Lockett would finish with 67 yards on 7 receptions and a touchdown as well. All 5 of Russell Wilson's passing touchdowns went to different receivers on the day as well. Looking at the defensive side of the ball, Jamal Adams, their elite safety, would lead the team yet again, as he finished with 10 tackles and a sack on the day. With this win, the Seattle Seahawks are now 2-0 as the New England Patriots now drop to 1-1 as of right now. And looking forward to the games that are looking forward to Monday night. It'll be the 1-0 New Orleans Saints taking on the 1-0 Las Vegas Raiders in Las Vegas. That'll be on ESPN. And that's everything I believe that has to do with football as for right now. Really quickly, I'm going to jump out to the NBA to show you what's been going on with the Western Conference Finals. And in Game 2 of the Western Conference Finals, the Los Angeles Lakers were able to take the Denver Nuggets to the very end, where they beat them 105-103 to get their second win of the series to go up 2-0. They are now 2 games away from clinching a spot in the NBA Finals. Looking out to Denver off the bench, Michael Porter Jr., their forward, would finish with 15 points and 4 rebounds in 20 minutes as he shot 6 for 9 from the field. Looking out to their starters, it would mainly be Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic. Jamal Murray, the Nuggets' elite point guard, would finish with 25 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, a couple steals, and a couple blocks as he shot 8 for 19 from the field in 44 minutes. He shot 2 for 9 from 3, and he made 7 of his 8 free throw attempts. And Nikola Jokic, the Denver Nuggets elite center, would finish with 30 points, 6 rebounds, 9 assists, and 4 steals in 39 minutes as he shot 9 for 20 from the field, 1 for 4 from 3, and he made 11 of his 12 free throw attempts. And then going out to the Los Angeles Lakers, going to their starters, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope would finish with 11 points in 31 minutes. Danny Green would also finish with 11 points and 5 rebounds in 28 minutes as he went 3 for 10 from the 3-point line. LeBron James, quite possibly arguably the greatest basketball player in the history of the world, finished with 26 points, 11 rebounds, and 4 assists. He also had 6 turnovers on the day and a couple of blocks in 36 minutes as he shot 10 for 20 from the field, 3 for 8 from 3, and he made 3 of his 4 free throw attempts. Best performance of the day would go to Anthony Davis yet again for the Los Angeles Lakers as he finished with 31 points, 9 rebounds, 2 assists, a steal, and a couple of blocks as he also had the game-winning 3-point shot to give them this win. He'd shoot 11 for 23 from the field in 39 minutes, 2 for 4 from 3, including one of the biggest threes of probably the biggest 3 of his career, and he made all 7 of his free throw attempts. And with his win, the Los Angeles Lakers, like I said, are now they're leading the series 2-0 over the Denver Nuggets, going into Game 3. And with no games today, the next game that will take place on Tuesday, it'll be Game 3 between the Lakers and the Nuggets on TNT. But with that said, jumping out to the NHL bubble just to let you know what's going on over there, because of course the Stanley Cup is going on, and so far the Dallas Stars lead this series. There was no game yesterday, but Game 2 of the Stanley Cup Finals will take place tonight at 8 o'clock as Dallas leads the series, and the Lightning look to either even it up, or the Dallas Stars are going to look to try to go up 2-0 to put them in even better position to win the Stanley Cup. Jumping out to the WNBA, it was some more playoff basketball. First off, the Connecticut Sun were able to beat the Las Vegas Aces 87-62 in a crazy, stunning game. Jasmine Thomas would finish with 31 points as WNBA MVP Aja Wilson finished with 19 points and 9 rebounds on the day. And the game between the Minnesota Lynx and the Seattle Storm was postponed, so they're going to play later. But there's no games today, but tomorrow you'll see it'll be the Lynx and the Storm again. It'll be the Connecticut Sun and the Las Vegas Aces in Game 2. Now, with that said, I'm going to jump out to what's been going on in the world of soccer as of yesterday, because there were a lot of big games yesterday because it was Sunday. And starting with the Premier League, Tottenham Hotspur were able to beat Southampton 5-2 as Heung-min Son finished with 4 goals on the day. Harry Kane would assist all of them, and then Harry Kane was able to get the 5th goal of the day to put them up 5-2. Big win for them. Additionally, Liverpool took on Chelsea. Sadio Mane, their elite forward, was able to get 2 goals on Chelsea to give them a very big win over a very talented Chelsea side. Continuing on to the Serie A, Juventus is able to beat Sampdoria 3-0 as Cristiano Ronaldo was able to score a goal and an assist. He had an amazing game as well. And then looking out to Ligue 1, Kylian Mbappe scoring in PK and Angel Di Maria and Marquinhos. They were able to score all 3 goals for PSG to get them the win over Nice. That was just another big win. So that's kind of everything that's been going on with soccer. And of course, it's Monday, so there's not much going on in that realm. But in the Premier League, Manchester City is taking on Wolverhampton. And that's a big game to look forward to. But really quickly, I'm going to jump out to the MLB just to finish off, just to show you what's been going on out in the MLB with yesterday's games and with Sunday's games. I'm going to start out in the West, starting out with the Angels. The Los Angeles Angels hosted the Texas Rangers and were able to beat the Rangers were able to beat the Angels 7-2. Their starting pitcher Kyle Cody was able to get his first win of the season. He allowed 1 earned run in 5 innings pitched as he struck out 5. Looking at the Los Angeles Angels, their GOAT center fielder Mike Trout would go 1 for 4 on the day. Their elite third baseman Anthony Rendon would go 0 for 3 as he finished with a walk and a strikeout. Just not much going for the Angels as Ohtani and Ward would get their RBIs of the day. Looking at Texas, their left fielder Willie Calhoun would go 2 for 4 on the day. Their right fielder Joey Gallo would go 1 for 4 with 2 RBIs and a run. He hit his 10th home run of the season in the first inning. A lot of home runs hit by the Rangers. Their second baseman Rougned Odor would finish 2 for 4 with 2 RBIs and a run. He hit his 8th home run of the season, and a bunch of other home runs would put them up. With this win, the Texas Rangers are now 19-34, and the Los Angeles Angels are officially 23-31. Really quickly, jumping out to Houston, the Houston Astros took on the Arizona Diamondbacks at home and were able to beat them 3-2. Urquidy would get the start as he would allow 2 earned run in 6 innings pitched, striking out 2. Madison Bumgarner would get the start for Arizona as he allowed no earned runs in 5 innings pitched, striking out 7. For Arizona, their left fielder Pavin Smith would go 2 for 4 with a run on the day. Their shortstop Nick Ahmed would go 1 for 3 with an RBI and a run as he hit his 5th home run of the season. Looking out to the Astros, their right fielder George Springer would go 3 for 4 with 2 RBIs and 2 runs. He had 2 home runs in one of the 6th and one of the 7th inning. He now has 13 home runs on the season. For the Astros, their elite second baseman Jose Altuve would go 0 for 4 on the day with a strikeout. Their elite third baseman Alex Bregman would go 1 for 2 with a run, and he also had a walk on the day. Continuing on, but just with this win, the Houston Astros are now 27-26 in the AL West, and the Arizona Diamondbacks are now 20-34 in the National League West. Continuing on, jumping out to Colorado, the Rockies hosted the Dodgers in Mile High City, and Senzatella was able to get his 5th win of the season. Gonsolin got his 2nd loss. Gonsolin would allow 2 earned runs in 5 innings pitched, striking out 10 for the Dodgers. And then looking at to how their offense did, their elite center fielder Cody Bellinger would go 1 for 3 on the day. Their left fielder AJ Pollock would go 1 for 5 with 2 RBIs on the day, and then their right fielder Zach McKinstry would go 2 for 4 with a run on the day. Looking out to Colorado, Senzatella would allow 1 earned run in 6 innings pitched, striking out 3 batters. And then looking out to how their hitters did, their first baseman, Josh Fuentes, would go 3 for 4 with 3 RBIs and 2 runs. He had a pretty big game for him. And with this win, the Colorado Rockies are 23-29 on the season, as the Los Angeles Dodgers they still have the best record in baseball at 38-16. Jumping out to Seattle, the Seattle Mariners hosted the San Diego Padres, and they lost in extra innings. And with this win, the Padres were able to clinch a spot in the playoffs. Just going into extra innings. At first, it was 3-3 going into the 9th. Both teams would score 1 run in the 10th. Fernando Tatis would get a single, and J.P. Crawford would bring in a run on a sacrifice fly. But then 3 runs in the 11th inning would put the Padres up, and they'd eventually beat the Mariners 7-4. Big win for them. And then looking at how both teams did. For the Mariners, Justin Dunn would get the start. He'd allow 3 earned runs in 5.2 innings pitched, striking out 6 batters. Their second baseman, Dylan Moore, would finish 2 for 5 with 2 RBIs and a run. He hit his 8th home run of the season. Going out to San Diego, their pitcher, Dinelson Lamet, would allow 1 earned run in 6 innings pitched, striking out 10 batters on the day. Their elite shortstop, Fernando Tatis Jr., would go 1 for 5 with an RBI on the day. Their elite third baseman, Manny Machado, will go 0 for 5 with a run. He also struck out once. Their first baseman, Mitch Moreland, would go 2 for 5 with an RBI and 2 runs. The right fielder, Will Myers, would go 1 for 3 with 3 RBIs and 2 runs. He walked twice, and he had his 14th home run of the season. With this win, the San Diego Padres are 34-20, and like I said, they clinched a spot in the playoffs, and the Seattle Mariners are now 23-30 with this loss. Jumping out to Oakland, the Oakland A's took on their crosstown rivals, the San Francisco Giants, and the Giants were able to beat them 14-2 in a pretty big win. For the Oakland A's, Mike Minor would pick up the loss. He allowed 6 earned runs in 5 innings pitched, striking out 8 batters on the day. Looking at how their offense did, no one on their offense got more than 1 hit, but their third baseman, Jake Lamb, would go 1 for 3 with 2 RBIs on the day. Looking at the San Francisco, starting off, their pitcher, Tyler Anderson, would get his third win of the season as he allowed no earned runs, 2 total runs, and 5.2 innings pitched, striking out 4 batters on the day. Looking at how their offense did, their designated hitter, Austin Slater, would go 2 for 5 with 2 runs on the day. Their pinch hitting second baseman, Daniel Robertson would go 2 for 2. Daniel Robertson will go 2 for 2 with a run on the day. Their first baseman, Brandon Belt, will go 1 for 3 with an RBI and 2 runs on the day. He had a pretty big game. Their left fielder, Darren Ruff, would go 2 for 4 with 4 RBIs and 2 runs. He had his 5th home run of the season. Their center fielder, Mauricio Dubon, would go 2 for 4 with an RBI and 2 runs. Their shortstop, Brandon Crawford, would go 2 for 5 with 4 RBIs and 2 runs. He had his 6th home run of the season. And their catcher, Chadwick Tromp, would go 3 for 5 with 3 RBIs and 2 runs. And he had his 4th home run of the season in the 3rd inning. With this win, the San Francisco Giants are 26-26. And with this loss, the Oakland A's are now 33-20. Jumping really quickly to the East, jumping out to Baltimore, the Baltimore Orioles hosted the Tampa Bay Rays, and they were able to beat them 2-1. It would be their starting pitcher, John Means, who got the win. Yarbrough got the loss for Tampa Bay. He would allow 2 earned runs in 7 innings pitched, striking out 8 batters. Looking at how their offense did, Joey Wendell will be the only player who got 2 hits. He finished 2 for 3 on the day. And their shortstop, Willie Adames, would go 1 for 4 with an RBI and a run. He had his 7th home run of the season. Looking out to the Baltimore Orioles, John Means would allow 1 earned run in 5 innings pitched, striking out 12 batters on the day. Big win for him. Looking at their second baseman, Hanser Alberto, he go 2 for 4 with a run. Their designated hitter, Renato Nunez, would go 2 for 4 with 2 RBIs. With this win, the Baltimore Orioles are now 23-31, and with this loss, the Tampa Bay Rays are 35-19. Jumping out to another game in the AL East, the Boston Red Sox hosted their division rivals, the New York Yankees, and were able to beat them 10-2. It would be their starting pitcher, Tanner Houck, who pick up his 2nd win of the season. He'd allow 1 earned run and strike out 4 batters in 6 innings for this win. Looking at the Yankees first, their elite designated hitter, Giancarlo Stanton, would go 0 for 4 as he struck out 3 times. Their elite shortstop, Gleyber Torres, would go 0 for 2 as he walked twice. And then jumping out to Boston, their third baseman, Rafael Devers, would go 2 for 5 with a run. Their designated hitter, JD Martinez, would go 1 for 5 with an RBI and a run. He hit his 6th home run of the season. Their first baseman, Bobby Dalbec, would go on to finish 2 for 4 with an RBI and 2 runs. He hit his 7th home run of the season. Their center fielder, Jackie Bradley Jr., would go 4 for 5 with an RBI and 3 runs. He had a pretty big game as well. Their left fielder, Michael Chavis, would go 2 for 4 with 5 RBIs and 3 runs. He hit 2 home runs on the day. He now has 5 on the season. Big win for him. And with this win, the Boston Red Sox are 20-34. With this win, the Yankees are now 31-22. Jumping out to New York, the Mets hosted the Atlanta Braves, and the Braves were able to beat them 7-0 as Kyle Wright picked up his 2nd win of the season. It'll be Porcello getting the start for the New York Mets, and the former Cy Young would finish with allowing 1 earned run on 7 innings pitched, striking out 10 batters on the day. In terms of their offense, Wilson Ramos was their only player who got 2 hits. He finished 2 for 3 on the day. Their elite designated hitter, Pete Alonso, would go 0 for 3 as he struck out once. And going out to the Atlanta Braves, Kyle Wright would pick up the win as he allowed no earned runs in 6 innings pitched, striking out 6. For the Atlanta Braves, their elite center fielder, Ronald Acuna Jr., would go 2 for 3 with 4 RBIs and 3 runs. He hit his 13th home run of the season, and he hit it later on, but he hit it in the 6th inning. Their elite first baseman, Freddie Freeman, will go 0 for 2 with a run as he walked 3 times. Their catcher, Travis d'Arnaud, would go 2 for 5 with 2 RBIs. Their elite second baseman, Ozzie Albies, would go 2 for 4 with a run on the day. With this win, the Atlanta Braves are now 31-22, as the New York Mets are now 24-29 on the season. Jumping out to Miami, the Miami Marlins hosted the Washington Nationals for a doubleheader. In the first game, the Marlins were able to beat the Nationals 2-1 at home as Sandy Alcantara was able to pick up the win. He allowed 1 earned run in 6 innings pitched, striking out 4 batters on the day. And then looking out to Washington, their GOAT-level pitcher, Max Scherzer, would pick up his 4th loss of the season. He's now 4-4. He allowed no earned runs, but there were 2 runs that he was responsible for. He struck out 6 batters in 5.2 innings pitched. And looking at how their offense did, their second baseman, Luis Garcia, would go 2 for 3 on the day for the Washington Nationals. Their elite left fielder, Juan Soto, would go 1 for 3 with a walk. And jumping out to the Marlins really quickly, their right fielder, Matt Joyce, would go 2 for 3 on the day. And just continuing along that line, they'd have no RBIs on the day as both of their scoring plays were, one of them was off a both of their runs were off of errors, so that was a big win for them. And jumping to the second game of this doubleheader, the Washington Nationals were able to completely blank the Nationals. The Nationals were able to blank the Marlins 15-0 as Bramer picked up the win. Ben Bramer would allow no earned runs. He'd allow 1 hit in 5 innings pitched, striking out 4 batters. And then for the Nationals offense, Trey Turner, their shortstop, would go 2 for 3 this game with 2 RBIs and 2 runs. He hit his 10th home run of the season. Juan Soto, their elite left fielder, would go 3 for 3 with 3 runs on the day. Big win for him. Their designated hitter, Asdrubal Cabrera, would go 3 for 5 with 4 RBIs and 2 runs. Asdrubal Cabrera would hit his 8th home run of the season. Kurt Suzuki, their catcher, would go 2 for 4 with 3 RBIs and a run. He had a pretty big game for them as well. Their first baseman, Jake Knoll, would go 2 for 5 with 2 runs on the day. Big win overall for the Nationals. And with this doubleheader split, the defending champion Washington Nationals are now 20-32, and the Miami Marlins are now 28-25 on the season. Jumping out to Philly, the Philadelphia Phillies hosted the Toronto Blue Jays, and the Blue Jays were able to get their 6th win of the season as Taijuan Walker would allow 1 earned run in 6 innings, striking out 8 to help his record jump to 4-3 on the season. Looking at for the Phillies, their elite right fielder, Bryce Harper, would go 0 for 4 as he struck out once. Their first baseman, Alec Boehm, would go 2 for 4 with an RBI and a run on the day. Looking out to Toronto, their shortstop, Bo Bichette, would go 2 for 5 with 2 runs on the day. Their right fielder, Teoscar Hernandez, would go 2 for 5 with 2 RBIs and a run as he hit his 16th home run of the season. Their left fielder, Lourdes Gurriel Jr., would go 2 for 5 with an RBI and a run as well. Their elite young first baseman, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., would go 0 for 4. And then with this win, the Toronto Blue Jays are now 27-26 as the Philadelphia Phillies are 27-26 with this loss. Last but not least, jumping out to the matchups that are going on in the Central, starting out in Detroit, the Cleveland Indians were able to come to town and beat them 7-4 as Carlos Carrasco picked up his 3rd win of the season. Boyd would pick up the loss for the Tigers. He allowed 5 earned runs in 5 innings pitched as Carlos Carrasco allowed no earned runs and allowed 1 hit, striking out 11 batters in 7 innings pitched. For the Detroit Tigers, their designated hitter and future Hall of Famer, Miguel Cabrera, would go 1 for 4 with 2 RBIs and a run. He hit his 7th home run of the season. Jumping out to the Cleveland Indians. First off, their elite shortstop, Francisco Lindor, would go 0 for 4 as he walked once. Their second baseman, Cesar Hernandez, would go 1 for 5. He had 2 runs on the day. Their third baseman, Jose Ramirez, would hit 2 home runs. He finished 2 for 4 with 4 RBIs and 2 runs on the day. He now has 15 home runs on the season. With this win, the Cleveland Indians are now 29-24. With this loss, the Detroit Tigers are now 22-30. Jumping to Cincinnati, the Cincinnati Reds were able to beat the Chicago White Sox 7-3. And it would be their relief pitcher, Lucas Sims, who got his 3rd win of the season. For the Chicago White Sox, Dylan Cease would pitch only 3 innings and allow 3 earned runs, striking out 5. And looking at how their batters did, their second baseman, Nick Madrigal, would go 2 for 3 with an RBI. Their first baseman, Jose Abreu, would go 2 for 3 with an RBI on the day. And then jumping out to Cincinnati, their pinch hitter, Aristides Aquino, sorry if I butchered your name. He finished 1 for 3 with an RBI and a run on the day. He now has 2 home runs on the season after an amazing start last year, but he's not getting much playing time this year. Also, their shortstop, Freddie Galvis, would go 2 for 2 with a run on the day. With this win, the Cincinnati Reds are now 27-27. With this loss, the Chicago White Sox are 34-19 in the AL Central. Jumping out to Milwaukee, the Brewers are able to beat the Kansas City Royals at home. Lindblom would pick up the win. Their starting pitcher, Josh Lindblom, would allow 1 earned run in 5.1 innings pitched, striking out 2. Brad Keller would pick up his third loss for the Kansas City Royals. He's now 4-3. He allowed 5 earned runs in 5 innings pitched, striking out 4. And looking at how the Royals did, their right fielder, Whit Merrifield, will go 2 for 4 with an RBI and a run. Salvador Perez, their catcher, would finish 1 for 4 with 2 RBIs and a run as he hit his 8th home run of the season. And then jumping out to Milwaukee, like I said, Lindblom along with Lindblom's amazing start, their elite left fielder and former NL MVP Christian Yelich would go 1 for 2 with a run as he walked twice on the day. Their designated hitter and possible future Hall of Famer Ryan Braun would go 2 for 4 with 2 runs on the day. Their first baseman Daniel Vogelbach will go 2 for 4 with 5 RBIs and 2 runs as he had 2 home runs on the day. He now has 5 home runs on the season. With this win, the Milwaukee Brewers are now 26-26 as the Kansas City Royals are now 21-32. Jumping out to Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh Pirates hosted the St. Louis Cardinals and were able to the Cardinals were able to beat them 2-1 while on the road. Jack Flaherty picked up his 4th win of the season. Musgrove would have an amazing start for the Pirates. Joe Musgrove would allow no earned runs in 6 innings pitched, striking out 11 batters on the day, but they would eventually lose. Jack Flaherty would allow 1 earned run on 6 innings pitched, striking out 11 on the day. And then looking up first to Pittsburgh, the only RBI for them would come from their designated hitter, Colin Moran, who'd go 0 for 3 on the day. He struck out 3 times as well. And then looking out to the St. Louis Cardinals, their elite first baseman, Paul Goldschmidt, he would finish 2 for 4 on the day, and just continuing to go on. Their future Hall of Fame catcher, Yadier Molina, would go 1 for 4 with 2 RBIs and a run. It's his 2-run home run in the 7th inning, his 4th home run of the season, would give the Cardinals the 2 runs that they needed for their win. With this win, the St. Louis Cardinals are now 26-24. With this loss, the Pittsburgh Pirates are 15-38. And then going out to the last game of the night, going out to Wrigley, the Cubs hosted the Minnesota Twins, La Bomba squad, as Jose Barrios would pick up his 5th win of the season, and Yu Darvish would pick up his 3rd loss of the season. First off, Yu Darvish would allow 4 earned runs in 6 innings pitched, striking out 9 batters on the day. And in looking at how the Cubs hit, their elite third baseman Chris Bryant would go 1 for 4 on the day. And then just their elite shortstop Javier Baez would go 0 for 4 on the day. Not much going on for the Cubs offensively. And looking out to Minnesota, their starting pitcher, Jose Barrios, would pick up his 5th win of the season. He allowed no earned runs, striking out 4 batters in 6 innings pitched. And then they're going out to their batters. Their right fielder, Max Kepler, would go 3 for 5 with 3 RBIs and 2 runs. He had his 8th home run of the season. The only home run of the game was hit by him. Their third baseman, Josh Donaldson, would go 2 for 3 on the day. Eddie Rosario would get the other RBI for the Twins. With this win, the Minnesota Twins are now 33-22, and with this loss, the Chicago Cubs are now 31-22. And with that said, I'm looking out to today's games because a lot of series are starting over anew because it is Monday. And with this going into this, the last probably week of baseball, this is going to be very interesting as now these games are really starting to mean something. Starting out with the 4 o'clock game, Kyle Gibson, the Rangers, are going to take on Dylan Bundy and the Angels. There's no playoff implications of this game, but it's still going to be a very big game. Zach Wheeler and the Phillies are really hot right now as they take on Anibal Sanchez and the Nationals. Zach Wheeler is still undefeated, so that's going to be a pretty impressive game to watch. Additionally, Dane Dunning is undefeated as the starter for the Chicago White Sox. He's 2-0 with a 2.33 ERA. He takes on Aaron Savali of the Cleveland Indians at 6-10. Continuing on, Brandon Woodruff's looking to get his 3rd win of the season as he takes on Luis Castillo and the Cincinnati Reds at 6:40. The Marlins take on the Braves. It'll be Trevor Rogers versus Huascar Ynoa, and these 2 teams are still fighting for who's going to have the best record in the National League East, as it looks like the Braves are 3 games ahead of the Marlins so far. Continuing on, John Lester's trying to get his 3rd win for the Cubs as they take on JT Brubaker and the Pirates at 7:05. Jacob deGrom, the elite pitcher for the New York Mets, is looking to get his 5th win of the season as the Mets take on Peter Fairbanks and the Tampa Bay Rays at 7:10. Adam Wainwright, who's sitting at 5-1, is looking to get his 6th win of the season as the Cardinals take on their in-state rivals, the Kansas City Royals, at 8:05. Lance McCullers Jr. is sitting at 3-2. He's looking to take on 6-2 Marco Gonzalez as the Astros take on the Mariners at 9:10. And the last game of the night tonight will be between the Rockies and the Giants, as German Marquez takes on Johnny Cueto of the Giants, who are still fighting for a playoff spot. And with that said, I really hope you appreciate I hope you appreciate all 43, 44 minutes of this piece, because there was a lot of sports played yesterday, and it's kind of rare when you get to see, and it's definitely rare. It's definitely history when you get to see baseball, football, and basketball all played in the same day. But with that said, I really appreciate you guys for listening to my piece. I hope all is well. Once again, it is Monday, September 21st, 2020. In this quarantine, I'm James Sims, and this is The Elite. Thank you for hearing my piece, and peace out.